Okay, let's get right into it. If you've been following European energy policy, you've probably heard a lot of victory laps since 2022. But from where I sit as a policy advisor, the internal analysis tells, a much more fragile story. A story that suggests our energy security might just be a house of cards.
This right here, this is the core of it. It's the uncomfortable truth that recent events have really brought into sharp focus. The strategy that we all celebrated as this masterstroke of energy independence, it might have just been a sideways jump from one trap right into another.
So, here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at why the strategy itself is so fragile. Then, we're going to dive into three specific and pretty scary risks that build on each other. We'll game out what happens when those cards start to fall. And finally, we'll talk about the only real hard path forward. Right, so the big pivot away from Russian gas after the invasion of Ukraine, it was fast, it was decisive, and honestly, it was celebrated everywhere from Brussels to Berlin. But what we're now realizing is that we simply replaced one very obvious dependency with a whole new set of less obvious, but maybe even more dangerous ones. This slide really just nails the switch we made. We cut ourselves off from pipelines controlled by a single hostile state, which, let's be clear, we had to do. But in our rush, we plugged ourselves directly into the global sea lanes, a system that relies on a handful of maritime chokepoints, like the Strait of Hormuz, that can be thrown into chaos by any regional conflict. So let's start with the most visible risk, the one everyone's talking about, our new thirst for liquefied natural gas. LNG was our savior back in 2022, but now it has become the entire continent's new Achilles heel. Now, you might look at this number and think 12 to 14%? That doesn't sound like a catastrophe. That's the percentage of Europe's LNG that comes from Qatar. But here's the crucial part. Every single drop of it has to sail through the Strait of Hormuz. And in today's super tight global market, losing 12% of your supply isn't a small problem. No, it triggers a frantic global bidding war for every available tanker, a war that Europe is not guaranteed to win. And here's what makes the current situation just so incredibly tense. We went into this potential crisis with our guard down. Our strategic gas reserves were sitting at just 29% full. That is way, way below the 5-year average of 47%. We basically let our emergency buffer drain away at the worst possible time. So, what does this mean in terms of dollars and cents, or euros, I should say? Well, analysts at ICIS ran the numbers on a 3-month closure of Hormuz. The result? European gas prices would almost triple, rocketing from around 32 euros to a staggering 92 euros per megawatt hour. We're talking a 2022 level price shock all over again. All right, so that was the obvious risk. Now, let's move to the next layer of this house of cards. This is the risk that nobody's talking about in the mainstream media, the one that has completely blindsided a lot of people. I'm talking about the deep structural reliance of our entire industrial economy on petrochemicals from the Gulf. You see, over the years, European manufacturers, plastics, chemicals, you name it, they've become hooked on huge volumes of these feedstocks. And why not? The Gulf has this massive cost advantage because their natural gas is dirt cheap. We basically, without even realizing it, built a core part of our industrial competitiveness on this constant, uninterrupted flow of materials. And now, that flow is under threat. And just look at the cascade effect here. This isn't contained to just one sector. A shortage of these basic building blocks means car parts don't get made, food can't be packaged safely, critical medicines face production hurdles. Construction projects literally grind to a halt. You see, this stops being just an energy crisis and turns into a full-blown industrial crisis, fast. And that brings us to the third vulnerability. And honestly, this might be the most frightening one of all. This is the point where the energy crisis slams directly into our food security. Let's talk about fertilizers. The Gulf's dominance in the fertilizer market is just immense. We're talking about them controlling nearly half of all the seaborne urea in the entire world. So a disruption in that one region doesn't create a regional problem. It creates a global price shock that hits every single farmer everywhere. And for our farmers here in Europe, it is a uniquely painful squeeze. It's a double hit. On one side, the cheap fertilizer imports they've come to rely on just vanish. At the exact same time, the price of natural gas, which is the main ingredient for making fertilizer here at home, is tripling. They are completely and utterly boxed in.
And the timing of this hypothetical crisis, it just couldn't be worse. It hits right in the middle of spring planting season in the Northern Hemisphere. Farmers have to buy and apply their fertilizer in that tiny window. A disruption in April could mean lower crop yields for the entire year, which means higher food prices for all of us come fall and winter.
So there you have it, the three big vulnerabilities: LNG, petrochemicals, and fertilizers. So now let's put it all together and walk through the scenario that has finance ministers across the EU losing sleep, the €90 per megawatt-hour gas price scenario.
This is the chain reaction we're terrified of. First, the price shock hits. Immediately, energy-guzzling industries like steel, glass, and chemicals have to start shutting down plants. Then, to stop widespread social unrest, governments have no choice but to step in with massive, budget-breaking subsidies. And that government spending puts them on a direct collision course with the European Central Bank, which is trying to fight inflation. It's a complete policy nightmare.
And let's not forget how much this costs. The last time we had to do this, during the 2022 crisis, these energy subsidies cost EU countries over €600 billion. The question is, do our national budgets have the room to do that all over again, just a few years later? I'm not so sure. And this is where the economic crisis becomes a political one. It always does. Shocks to energy prices have a really nasty history of fueling populist anger and, yes, even toppling governments. An event like this could shatter the unity we've worked so hard to build on energy policy and create deep political instability, right when we need to be working together.
So what's the way out? If the last crisis was solved with quick fixes like building a few new LNG terminals, this one is different. It's going to require something much deeper, much more structural. And there are no easy answers here.
This quote is probably the single most important lesson from all our current analysis. Diversifying our suppliers away from Russia was the right first step, absolutely. But it's totally meaningless if all your new suppliers send their goods through the exact same handful of vulnerable choke points. We solved for the supplier, but we forgot to solve for the route.
The only real long-term solution is to get off imported hydrocarbons completely. And that means a massive wartime-level acceleration of renewables. It means serious investment in new next-generation nuclear power. It means actually building a green hydrogen economy, not just talking about it. And it means electrifying our industries. These are not quick fixes. These are decade-long projects.
And so that really leaves us with the fundamental question we have to face right now. Was our post-2022 strategy a real solution? Or did we just swap a very obvious dependency on Russian pipelines for a much less understood and potentially far more fragile dependency on global maritime trade? It's a question we have to answer, and fast.